Hello again. Welcome to the sixth video of our video series. In today's video, we're diving into some of the consequences researchers have identified that result from chronic peer rejection and social exclusion during adolescence. Chronic peer rejection during adolescence has been linked to struggles in day-to-day life, such as poor academic achievement, internalizing behavioral problems, and externalizing behavioral problems. We will be highlighting the links between negative peer interactions and the manifestation of these consequences throughout the video. Without further ado, let's get into it. When you think of your adolescent years, school is likely to come to mind. Adolescence is one of the first times in our life where we're academically challenged, and academic performance during this time is incredibly important for many. Because of this, the impact of negative peer interactions on academic performance is a frequent topic of discussion. Studies on the topic have shown how social exclusion by peers during adolescence has a negative impact on intellectual performance, with adolescents undergoing exclusion performing way worse on working memory paradigms and cognitive tasks. For example, a 2019 study conducted by Furman et al. Investigated the effect of social exclusion on working memory in young adolescents, ages 10 to 14, middle adolescents, ages 14 to 18, and adults. Immediately following a social exclusion trial of cyberball, participants performed a working memory task. Results from the study showed that only the young adolescents had a decrease in working memory accuracy following the exclusion trial, something not observed with middle adolescents or adults. This effect was not due to improved working memory with age, as the results on the working memory task following exclusion were compared to their baseline performance prior to the exclusion conditions. The results from the study demonstrate how even a brief exposure to social exclusion during adolescence can have a negative impact on the individual. Here, specifically on their working memory capabilities. This finding raises concern for the academic abilities of these adolescents undergoing negative peer interactions during the school day. One negative interaction with peers can result in poor retention during their next class. Peer rejection during adolescence has additionally been shown to result in the manifestation of internalizing symptoms. Internalizing problems are characterized by anxious and depressive mood and behavior, as well as social withdrawal. Several theories have been proposed to offer explanations for the increase in internalizing problems following exclusion. One of the most prominent theories proposes that repeated exposure to negative peer interactions amplifies negative emotions, such as sadness, which in turn heightens anxiety. This can lead to the social withdrawal of the individual, as well as increased processes that contribute to the development of internalizing disorder, such as low self-esteem or troubles placing trust in others. Explanations for the rise of internalizing problems following social exclusion can also be found in the brain. Several studies have implicated activity in the anterior cingulate cortex as a contributing factor for the manifestation of these problems. A longitudinal study conducted by Maston found that adolescents showed a greater ACC activation to social exclusion, were found to be more likely to show an increase in depressive symptoms the year after the stimulated exclusion. So, the heightened reactivity of the ACC to social exclusion made an individual more susceptible to internalizing problems at a later date. Another study done in 2016 by Rudolph et al. Further confirmed this finding. Results from the study found that activation of the social pain network, the DACC, SGACC, and anterior insula, was significantly associated with the presence of internalizing problems within adolescent girls that had a history of peer victimization, but not in the group that did not have a history of peer victimization. There was a particularly strong and significant effect observed with the activation of the DACC. The chronically victimized group additionally reported higher levels of threat to their basic social needs following exposure to social exclusion. Let's move on to externalizing problems. Externalizing problems are characterized by aggression, opposition towards individuals or society, and delinquent behavior. Drug use and addiction, sexual promiscuity, violence, use of nicotine products, and vandalism are just a small subset of the potential coping behaviors encompassed in externalizing problems. These behavioral displays create a stigma against those that do not fit in with the social norm, resulting in further exclusion and ultimately creating a cycle of repeated negative peer interactions. Despite the negative aspect of externalizing problems, those expressing these behavioral issues might not necessarily be at fault. Research is emerging to reveal neural explanations of the manifestation of externalizing problems in chronically rejected youth, offering a shift in perspective that the troubled youth might not necessarily be at fault for the choices they're making. An example of this can be seen with risk-taking behavior, a frequent externalizing problem seen during adolescence. Research has revealed that adolescents that were exposed to chronic peer victimization have heightened activation in regions implicated in the reward value of risk-taking as compared to their accepted peers who have not experienced frequent peer rejection. This heightened activation is seen in the ventral striatum, the insula, the orbitofrontal cortex, and the amygdala. The heightened activation of these brain regions means that the adolescent is more likely to make the risky choice when given the option compared to their peers. For example, adolescents with chronic peer rejection are more likely to speed through intersections during a driving simulation in order to make it to the final destination before a competing team than their peers, making the risky choice. So, adolescents with a history of chronic peer victimization are more likely to make reckless risk-taking decisions compared to their peers due to their heightened activation of brain regions involved in reward valuation. This offers a neurological explanation of why we see the manifestation of externalizing problems following negative social outcomes during adolescence. Another frequent behavioral issue seen with externalizing problems is aggression. Looking at the literature, we see an overlap between known neural circuitry in aggression and brain regions shown to be heightened in adolescents with a history of peer rejection. Regions implicated in retaliation behavior, the type of aggression we see when one is responding to their negative social circumstance, include the rostral anterior cingulate cortex, dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, and rostral medial prefrontal cortex. The ACC and MPFC are most consistently found to be engaged during simulated retaliation behavior. As we have previously mentioned, studies have found heightened activation in the prefrontal cortex and the ACC in chronically peer-rejected adolescents. It can be inferred that the heightened activity in this subgroup of adolescents may be a contributing factor to the aggressive response that is additionally seen in response to exclusion. However, more research would be required to confidently make this claim. This potentially offers further support for the neurological explanation of the rise of externalizing problems resulting from negative social interactions with peers during adolescence. Okay, so adolescents with a history of chronic peer rejection have been shown to exhibit heightened neural activity in areas mediating externalizing behaviors, making them neurologically more susceptible to externalizing problems than their peers. However, just because they're more likely to, does not mean that they will always have to behave a certain way with no say in the matter. Adolescents are still able to enable cognitive control and restrain these problematic behaviors. That being said, research is emerging that shows holding back these behaviors might be more neurally taxing on chronically peer-rejected adolescents than their peers. When restraining externalizing problems, such as risk-taking or aggressive tendencies, chronically rejected adolescents show increased levels of activity in the PFC and dorsal striatum when forgiving their excluding peers, as well as heightened activity in the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex when making the stop-safe decision during the stoplight task. You may recall from our review of brain regions in a prior video that the prefrontal cortex plays a large role in the regulation of our actions, restraining inappropriate behaviors or actions that the amygdala otherwise would love for us to make in response to an emotionally salient situation. So, heightened activity in this region shows that chronically rejected adolescents have to try harder to restrain externalizing problems than their peers, offering further support for how negative social interactions during adolescence results in the presence of externalizing problems. This brings us to the end of the video. Today, we've highlighted the consequences that arise following repeated negative peer interactions during adolescence, as well as neurological explanations for why this occurs. Given the fact that adolescence is a time where the environment has such a significant impact on neurodevelopment, It is likely that the experience of peer rejection during this time resulted in neurodevelopmental changes that those not exposed to rejection do not experience, ultimately leading to the differences of neural activity between groups. That's all, folks. Thanks for tuning in.